Welcome to Warp Core Breach, episode 54. Today, we're doing a bit of an OP recap of the year.
A sort of review of the months that we've spent playing and some of the more interesting moments that we've shared.
Yeah, we have 11 scenarios because, that's what we do. And that starts all the way back with Temporal Cold War OP3. I don't remember the specific scenario name.
We technically ran Cold War 2 back in December, so that's the cutoff for 2016.
Yeah. And then from there we went to The Void, Doomsday Machine, the classic movie OP series, Tin Man, Corvite Maneuver, Trouble with Tribbles, Attack on Gowron, and the Battle of Mempah, which we haven't played yet, so we won't talk about that.
Irregardless, it is still something I'm very much looking forward to, and I'm sure we'll make it happen sometime.
Yes, I think that's set for January. But
we can make it happen.
All the way back to Temporal Cold War 3. If I remember correctly, and I think you have the scenario rules pulled up so you can correct me if and when I go wrong, that was one where there was a Zindi sphere and you had to discard upgrades and such because it was messing with your ship.
That is exactly right. Not only that, but everybody had awful range penalties for firing with primary weapons, which made it a lot more difficult to walk into it like a standard joust scenario.
Oh, right. And that's where you ran high-yield photon torpedoes.
Precisely. I looked at all the penalties primary weapons were getting and thought to myself that, you know what, secondary weapons are all right. And if I'm running 3 ships with secondary weapons, torpedoes are like the thing for that.
Yeah, didn't you run Deep Space Nine and the Jaeger?
Yeah. Looking back, kind of misjudged the situation. I was deciding between the Gore Portas and the Jaeger for which to bring, since they both kind of squeeze and cheat some extra quality onto torpedoes. And eventually I decided on the Jaeger, which was kind of my downfall since every single time it popped just a little too early because it has less durability than the Gore Portas. And so I learned that it's important to build a ship big enough to take at least one hit before firing back.
Yes. Oh, geez, the Gore Portas with the energy dampener, that would have been messy in this scenario.
There's a ton of fun stuff, and anytime primary weapons are not at a premium, I think secondary weapons have a place to squeeze in.
I like that scenario. It really did change the game. It did it without completely hurting everything. It gave you a reason to run things you normally didn't run.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's what a good scenario does.
Exactly. It changes what you're looking at when you're building and gives you a sort of objective or strategy to focus on and shape your build.
I was a fan of that one.
Absolutely. I think most of the Temporal Cold War were pretty fun, and that one especially brought a lot of gimmick potential.
Yeah. Now, The Void, that one was good in theory and bad in execution.
Which is a lot like my fleet that I made for that one.
Yeah. I think a lot of us have those feelings. I mean, I put in a house rule that may have actually made it worse, in that when your ship died, you left your mission tokens there.
I felt that was kind of a fun thematic addition. I don't think that changed the scenario too much, but I remember getting the very distinct impression that it was kind of going to be a stalemate or kind of a stall fest where people would mine the center wrecks and just kind of never cross the halfway point, and I could not have been more wrong.
Yeah.
A lot of people just shot right through it without bumping or having any sort of problems, and I'd kind of not built for that, and it showed, so live and learn. And I think that's another important thing to bring up, is that over the course of all these OPs, you learn these little lessons of reading the scenario better or learning what sort of ranges are going to be engaged at and kind of figuring out which ships are what you want to build with.
I hear you. The Void was cool, though, because, again, it gave you a reason to run some low ships and go more for swarming to try to get more ships beaming up these resources, even though that's completely counterintuitive to the scenario as it was portrayed on screen, because you wanted to conserve resources.
Mm-hmm.
But it was interesting.
Yeah, I think it was a really good OP, even though it was not my best showing.
Yeah, it changed the way you played.
Exactly.
Which, again, is a good thing. Doomsday was very different.
Yeah, that was one of the ones that has a very in-your-face side objective that is going to heavily influence the outcome of the scenario because of the large amounts of attacks and damage it can put out.
Oh, yeah. I remember I ran the Tiny Prize Shuttle Knot. And I had fun with that.
Absolutely. It's
and
a
nobody else
strategy.
had fun with that.
I feel like that kind of harkens forward to the attack on Gowron, but we'll come to that in time.
Yeah. I said, I'm going to run this once, and then I'm going to put it away.
Going to see what it's like, give it a try, play it on the table, and then put it away.
Yeah. And I was at the point, I'm like, I haven't won in a while. I'm going to win.
Let's give it a kick in the pants.
So, sometimes you're just going to play that way.
Sometimes that's just the list you show up with.
And frankly, I needed it because
Exactly.
I almost lost.
No judgments here. Everyone is quite competitive these days, and I would not begrudge you bringing a strong fleet.
No, and the Doomsday Machine was a very good scenario. I still feel like the Planet Killer itself needed more oomph to be just that little extra, but it was still good.
Mm-hmm. I get what you're saying in that it kind of could have used a little bit more presence, but I think that it had enough impact and was reasonably balanced, and that's also something I'm looking for in an OP. If the Doomsday Machine kind of one-shot whoever caught its first aggro, that would really make the scenario less balanced and a little bit more random, which I don't think is what I'm necessarily looking for.
True. But remember, the only reason it was even in play was because of a house rule I put in, which was to make it move if it didn't sense anybody.
That's true, and I think that's very important, because the way it was written, it had the possibility that it just sat there waiting for
Godot
to get like a whiff of an enemy ship within range 3. But if you stayed outside of that, just that lane on the other end of the board, you never had to deal with it.
Right.
Didn't you at one point actually shoot the Doomsday Machine with one of your other ships to draw aggro off of your wounded ship?
Yes.
That was such a cool moment as well.
I needed to. I'm like, it's going to shoot this and I can't afford it, so you're the sacrificial lamb.
Absolutely, and after that it kind of drops aggro and can reacquire a target, which is difficult for it to do if you're really keeping that one ship alive and spending a lot of resources to do it.
Yeah, and that was one of those moments where you're going, oh, okay, there are some cool things left to do in this game.
There's a lot more to building a list that has to do with piloting a list.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because anybody could take that same list to the tournament, and they would not have encountered the same results that I did.
It takes a special kind of creativity to bait the objective like that.
So then we got Tin Man.
Tin Man was... I don't know how to feel about Tin Man. I'm kind of mad at Tin Man for being so kind of bland, but
yeah,
at the same time, I can't blame it. It was kind of true to the scenario. It was a big hazard, but also kind of interesting trying to make first contact.
Yeah, I wanted to like it. I really did.
I think the failing was they just stacked up too much negatives to being anywhere close to Tin Man, and that made you really not want to interact with the objective at all. You could use it sort of as a control section, just to block off part of the map from your opponent, but if you weren't doing that, then there was no reason to ever even engage with Tin Man.
Well, and the other problem was you had a planet, which was a sun, which was instant death, which created more problems and incentivized movement control cards. While that's not the biggest problem in the game, it just made certain cards even better than they already are.
Yeah, not to mention it kind of incentivized a certain stalling play style that isn't necessarily as fun or as engaging as an actual brawly fight.
Right. So, I skipped ahead a little bit here.
I was going to mention.
Yeah. But we also had the classic movie OP series, which is something that a lot of people had wanted for a long time.
Yeah, you know, that big whole 3 OP series that we stuck in the middle of the year and was super popular.
Yeah, and
nothing
you know
big,
what?
Of course.
They're the 3 movies that tell a good story. Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, Voyage Home. And they translated well to the tabletop. Maybe not perfectly, but we can get into all of that. I really liked Wrath of Khan.
Absolutely. The Matara Nebula was such a different setting that you normally play Attack Wing on. There were no target locks, no scans, no shields. Everything was range 1. It was this chaotic mess, and out of that you got some of the most interesting gimmick combinations and unexpectedly useful cards. So I really think it was a success from the building end of fleet creation.
Oh, yeah. It changed the ships that you thought were good. It changed the kinds of cards you brought in, and it changed the way you flew.
Suddenly, the Regent's flagship is on everyone's A-list, and the prototype weapon 0 for the Xindi is King of the Kings. It's incredible just to see the almost immediate shift in meta once we get presented with a new type of scenario and environment that we're playing the game within. Those different abilities and effects that change how you build and play, those are really cool for me, and this OP really did it well.
Yeah, that's one of those great aspects. You're going, okay, how do I adapt? How do I change my thinking to make me go, okay, what is good? What is going to change? How do I best make this scenario work for me? And anytime you have that, you're not only seeing, okay, who can just take the same list and ram it down somebody's throat. You're seeing who's the creative builder, who's a good pilot.
Who's thinking ahead, who knows their audience, who's bringing the right cards to suit the situation.
Right, and this build did both of those things well. It combined the building and the piloting, because if you couldn't fly, you were toast in the Mutara Nebula.
Absolutely. You had no option other than to choose the right maneuver.
Yeah. And also when to sensor echo and where to sensor echo.
And I think that even the time we played, I don't think anyone fully got a grip on how and when to use the sensor echo action provided by the scenario. Just because it doesn't come up enough in normal play for most players to have a good sense of how and when to use it. And so most people just forgot about it when the time came to try zipping around in the nebula itself.
Right. It's not on your action bar, so you forget about it. I thought I did okay with it, but then again, I was also running a suicidal torpedo fleet, so I was never truly in contention for anything in that scenario.
You weren't necessarily in it to win it either.
I was having fun.
Exactly.
And to me, that was worth it.
And that's the other kind of build that you can show up with.
Oh, yeah. But Search for Spock.
Yeah.
That was different. I loved a different deployment zone. I want to see more stuff like that.
I agree. I thought that was really cool that out of nowhere, I'm starting with a ship just in the middle of the map, and the kind of mind games that brings along. I had London bring a generic Keldon class with high captain skill and stick that sideways right next to the planet, and turn one just come in and start firing on me, which I had not been expecting, and of course had lowered all my shields to pick up my crew.
Yep.
Bye. The fact that someone had just come up with that idea that I had never even considered, and it was so effective against me, just opens your eyes once again to what sorts of gimmicks and abuses of the scenario you can get up to with some of these.
Yeah. Uploading crew.
Yeah.
Bringing different people on board, and crew slots? Who cares about crew slots?
That was the coolest thing, being able to throw crew onto ships that had a hard time getting a hold of those. I know for a fact that bioships got a lot of Spock being brought aboard to give them access to battle stations. There's a lot of sort of dreadnought builds that you can build because you can squeeze even more crew on there than you normally would be able to. And the fact that all those crew on the planet were free meant that you got effectively a boost to your points to build for the scenario with.
Right, which was a gift, but it worked both sides, and it made you really consider who you brought, where you deployed them, and the order you brought them up, because the planet was killing off crew, your away teams were fighting, and you needed to pick your moments of who to bring up when.
Exactly. It often came down to 4 or 5 crewmen getting immediately just evacuated from the planet, and then 1 or 2 being left to die either to the planet or to the opposing away team's fire.
Yeah, I know for me, I had a couple of utility crew there that were like, well, I'll bring them, and I'll bring them up if my opponent has this thing that I need to deal with.
In case of X, Y, or Z scenario.
Yeah, and I think in all 3 of my games, my opponent didn't, so I'm like, well, don't need you. I just wish that they weren't as restrictive with the dice that the away teams rolled.
Yeah, it was weird that a team of 5 and a team of 2 both attacked and blocked at the same strength.
Yeah.
I think that there should have been something scalar there to give you an incentive to leave your crew behind for a round or 2, knowing that you'll have to drop shields when you're engaged with your opponent if you want to pick them up after that. It would have led to some interesting decisions there between setting up and preparing or trying to get everybody out alive.
Even if it was just quality, like rerolls for more crew, I can see kind of capping the dice, but
yeah.
Give me quality if I have more people.
Give me some way to get better odds.
Yeah, a little something. Don't like completely break it because, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Anyways, Voyage Home.
Voyage Home.
That was weird.
Was weird. I think that was one of the less interesting OPs that have been run, just because the objective was so easy to ignore. And I say that, and it did actually lose me a game over in Fremont, so I shouldn't really be taking this stance, but I still think that in the wide majority of cases, it was not an impactful objective.
Voyage Home's still just weird. I mean, this probe that's crossing the board, it puts a timer on the game.
It technically counts as a ship, so it messes with mine placement. It also kind of acts as zone control, so you can stall yourself behind it when your opponent can't really cross the gap to come get you.
Yeah.
I think it just leads to some overall unhealthy engagements where most people are trying to take the most advantage of there being a big obstacle in the way. One of the interesting ways I saw someone try and mess with that was to take the quantum slipstream device from the independent faction and jump across the space probe before they would normally be able to get across safely and start like attacking from the flank and rear. But
Sure.
It just kind of seemed like the scenario itself didn't want you to fight, didn't want you to engage, wanted you to sit back and let your opponent come to you. And if both players do that, nobody ends up even fighting, and it's a very boring match all around, especially because it's capped at like 12 rounds because of the probe's movement.
Right. And it led to interesting deployment tactics.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it.
Once everyone had deployed, everyone saw what was going on. One person probably set up behind right next to the probe in terms of the x-axis, just so that they could take a turn or two to set up while it was sitting as a barrier between both of their fleets. And someone probably moved around the side so that they could cross the halfway mark of the map and then just take a turn to have the opponent in their sights.
Yeah.
Very binary, very boring, and not really very engaging, like I was saying. It's a bad incentive for the players, in my opinion.
Yeah. So, it was thematic, but it didn't make for a good OP.
Precisely. It did follow the show, but not necessarily in a way that's enjoyable to play on the table.
So, would not play again. Go away.
Exactly.
Which leads us to Corbomite Maneuver, which saw another thing following ships around on the board. As written, it was terrible.
A lot of questions, a lot of puzzling scenarios, lots of what-ifs. How do you play this when? And just confusing and conflicting information.
Mm-hmm. I still don't remember much about Corbomite Maneuver, so I think I've just put a mental block there, because I did not like it one bit.
I was a fan enough of it once the probe died, but the fact that the probe was nothing, there was no downside to destroying it before it interacted with either fleet, meant that there was just no incentive to play with it. Both players have a vested interest in not getting screwed up by the objective, so they move up turn one, kill off the objective, and then proceed to fight normally. And there are very few scenarios when that wouldn't be how it plays out. And while I did run into one of them playing over in Fremont, I actually was lured into being too close to the space buoy, I think. Yeah, the space buoy, before I could manage to kill it. And so it actually damaged me, and those points were the difference between a win and a loss for me.
Mm.
Because it came down to a very close points total at the end there because of a few mistakes that I made.
I know when you and I played, I didn't destroy it. You didn't destroy it, because it was already heading towards me.
Uh-huh.
And by the time I could destroy it, it would have damaged me, thus giving you points.
You really gave me the mean look when I actually pulled off the warp jump and attracted it in a certain direction to make it basically overlap you.
Yeah.
You were nonplussed at the time.
I was not having any of that. I was done.
I thought it was
also
a cute
round
trick,
3.
and it probably had been a long day.
It had been a long day, and I was not going for the win at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, Corbomite Maneuver.
Interesting, but not a very impactful objective if you made any sort of move against it.
Trouble with Tribbles, however.
Oh, and
that was a good scenario.
Was a good scenario and will be. As you're aware, I've been subtly tweaking and rebuilding my fleet for this because I'm about to go over to Fremont to play that this coming weekend. And I've been trying to squeeze as many attacks as possible into this fleet. And I kind of come up with what I consider to be the pinnacle of just throwing attack dice so many different times with quality all the while.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Robert's trying to convince me to play, and I know what you're planning, and I'm just going, yeah, no.
No, I don't want to face that, frankly.
No, I can, write campaign stuff out. I can do anything except get massacred.
I am not exactly interested in just getting blown off the face of the planet.
I mean, granted, I could have fun in 2 other rounds.
Of course. And it's always fun just to try a gimmicky fleet, even when you're convinced you're going to fare poorly in a matchup. But
hey, I've taken plenty of fun fleets knowing I'm going to die.
Yes. And I appreciate that. It adds to the fun and shows that you're not just in it for the hyper meta, which is not necessarily a problem, but I think it's more fun and friendly to play for your own gimmicks and your own purposes rather than just stark winning.
Yeah. You know, you got to have a balance. But, Tribbles, I had some really fun matches, and fortunately, the best of those matches is on camera.
Absolutely.
And that's the way to have it.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that was our match.
Really? Could have been. I'm trying to remember back to what I did with Trouble with Tribbles. I say that, it being actually quite recent as well.
Yeah, that was like October.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, it was a good match. It was a close match. And
I'm interested in seeing what I can do with the Tribbles now that I'm taking another shot at it.
Yes. So Tribbles, good, fun. I would probably tweak it if I had the power to run it again.
Yeah.
But not seriously. An Attack on Gowron.
Attack on Gowron.
Really good one.
Not only is it the start of the Klingon Civil War, meaning that it introduces the cost reduction for Klingon cards being assigned to your ship, being something that I'm so utterly happy about, just because it changes what I can build with, what sort of combos I can get up to, what captains and crew and upgrades I really want to throw on my ship for the best optimization I can find. But also because this scenario in specific gives you a free Admiral Gowron and a lot of points invested in him. So it really incentivizes a big, blocky, tanky dreadnought style of play, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, Weekend has more stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it good.
And I had a lot of fun just destroying people because both at Hilmar and over in Fremont, I decided to run the Tactical Cube 001 with a shuttle of its own, tons of attack quality, and basically 17 different defensive upgrades that just made it impossible to kill.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wound up with 5 tables out of 6 matches and 1 very almost table. So...
and I'm glad I never faced
disturbingly successful build. I actually hadn't expected it to be such a meat grinder, but the Cloaked Mines alongside a 360 Borg Tactical Cube with high quality was just too much for a lot of ships to deal with.
Yeah.
Especially when they dump like 5 or 6 attacks into the Tactical Cube, only to barely scratch its shield. So that was really fun.
Yeah. And we'd be remiss if we didn't at least mention the Battle of Mempah, which is area control and something we're both looking forward to.
Absolutely. I think everyone has their own idea of how the Battle of Mempah is going to play out and what sort of gimmicks and tactics are going to be useful. I've built with some very directed gimmicks, both for here and in Fremont. And while I haven't gotten to play either of them yet, I'm very confident that they'll take some builds by surprise and be extremely effective at what they are designed for.
Well, that's good. So, I don't really have like a top 3 written out, ordered, but for me, my like best of the year were Temporal Cold War 3, Trouble with Tribbles, and Wrath of Khan.
Mm-hmm.
And Attack on Gowron is a really close 4th.
Attack on Gowron is like top 2 for me. I can't tell whether I want to put that above the Matara Nebula over with the Wrath of Khan OP, but both of those were super, super fun to play in and to work with, just because they changed the game so fundamentally.
Okay.
And if I had to pick a third one out of this, I would probably pick the Search for Spock, just because it also changed how you could build your fleet and what sort of ships you could sort of make to be effective. And that's what I'm always looking for. I'll say it once, I'll say it 1,000 times. I want the OP, the objective, whatever it is, to change how I build my fleet, to give me a reason to build a specific way, to reward me if I work with it, and to punish me if I try to work against it. And all three of those OPs that I just rated are very solid examples of OPs that did that well and thematically. So, very impressed by their performance.
Oh, there we go. So, we're mostly in agreement there.
There are definitely a few top-tier scenarios that I think everyone enjoyed and can see the value in.
Don't go play Tin Man again.
I mean, you can if you want, but please house rule it.
Yeah, take some ideas, make it your own.
The idea of Tin Man is cool. I like the idea of a planet that's just a star. Don't touch the planet. But the area of effect damage, the just ridiculous amounts of action economy you had to pour in to make contact, the super low rewards for going through the hell of scans to make contact, it was just not done well. And I think that it can be done well.
It can. It certainly can. So house rule it, make it better, and then tell us what you did to make it better, and we'll go from there.
You do the testing for us, basically. Thanks in advance.
Yeah. So, but all in all, I think a good set of OPs. I know you didn't get to play much of the stuff that was in 2015. I don't know that there's quite the standout OP like 2015 had, with Peak Performance being this like really amazing OP.
I've heard that Tholian Web
want to go back and play again.
A really big change.
Tholian Web was 2014.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so like Tholian Web and Arena are 2014's big ones. 2015 has Peak Performance as its big thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know what 2016's standout OP is.
I think the Wrath of Khan probably makes a good case for itself, being that it's this whole Mutara nebula.
Yeah. I can see that. I could see Attack on Gowron being a standout.
Also willing to give that one a shout out. I think Attack on Gowron, not only because of my personal success, but just because I enjoyed what it brought to the table.
So, maybe Trouble with Tribbles, but I don't know. I think it's yet to really be seen. It'll come together, though.
Especially in retrospect, we'll be able to see what we liked and really enjoyed.
Yeah. But I think there's something there. I think 2016 as a whole, when it comes to the OPs, comes together, and it is up there. It holds its own in comparison to the rest of OPs.
I don't necessarily have the best context to compare it to, but I've got to say that I have thoroughly enjoyed this year's set of OPs. And while they haven't all been gems, I think that the good heavily outweighs the bad.
Well said. And we'll end on that.
Thank you all so much for listening along. I've been Necromancer.
And I've been David.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Warp Core Breach is produced by Nick Norris and David Montgomery, with additional content from our contributors. Our computer is voiced by Corinne Donnelly.
Warp Core Breach is not endorsed, sponsored, or affiliated with CBS Studios Incorporated or the Star Trek franchise. All Star Trek trademarks and logos are owned by CBS Studios Incorporated.
All sound files are used under Creative Commons 3.0 by attribution. For specifics, please visit our Facebook page by searching Warp Core Breach Podcast. If you want to contribute to the show, let us know on the Facebook page, or you can email us at warpcorebreachpodcast@gmail.com.